Christians have been on the defense in the culture war for a long time now, and it's a rare occasion to see someone boldly stand and articulate their beliefs in a public square with the kind of eloquence, composure, and steadfast demeanor that Reverend Robinson had. His speech calmly defended beliefs that have been held for millennia, capturing the attention of millions of people. There comes the obvious questions: why aren't more people like him? And what do Christians need to do differently? While it feels very impudent and even presumptuous to ponder this question myself, I think it's important that we talk about it given the significance of his speech. There is an attitude among many Christians who feel the culture war is already lost. Many of them are in despair. This outlook of bleakness is somewhat understandable. It's a fearful thing to speak up. One risks being canceled, losing their friends or their livelihood, or even the custody of their own children for speaking out on biblical truths. And Western culture seems to have moved very quickly in this area, from the sexual revolution to redefining marriage to broad promotion of transgenderism. Then in seemingly the next breath, it has been decided that it's child abuse if you as a parent do not allow your 5 or 8-year-old child to get their genitals mutilated or let them become permanently sterilized by puberty blockers. In fact, you can get your children taken away in many parts of the country or the world if you don't comply. Girls are also forced off podiums in many sports events as biological males claim their rewards by pretending to be women. Additionally, school systems have been weaponized to the point where parents have been silenced and kicked out of school board meetings for merely exposing books containing pornography, gay or otherwise. Media from Hollywood, TikTok, and others continue to promote these evil morals on a global scale. However, we did not get here overnight. Much of the challenges we are facing is a direct result of multi-generational apathy. This transformation is best started on an individual level and begins with discipling children from an early age. It takes thousands of hours to disciple a child, and I know this personally as a recipient of this sort of discipleship. Each generation must value their children so that they might teach a child not only what is right and wrong, but why something is right and wrong, and to think critically. These are not new ideas. It has been said, the state must proclaim the truth that the child is the most valuable possession a people can have. In this matter, the state must assert itself as the trustee of a millennial future in the face of which the egotistic desires of the individual count for nothing, and they will have to give way before the ruling of the state. This statement was made by Adolf Hitler, and sadly, he understood that if his ideas were to stand the test of time, he must indoctrinate children from the youngest ages. History is clear in detailing the injection of his poisonous worldviews into the German school system. Far too long, we have taken a simplistic approach to education as it being purely the basic subjects like reading, writing, and arithmetic. However, the majority of educators who have instructed our current teachers have been pushing an agenda in higher education for decades now. Parents must not abdicate the discipleship of their children to the state schools. We see the dangers of this by examining the award-winning writings of John Dunphy 40 years ago. He wrote, "I am convinced that the battle for humankind's future must be waged and won in the public school classroom by teachers who correctly perceive their role as the proselytizers of a new faith, a religion of humanity that recognizes and respects the spark of what theologians call divinity in every human being. These teachers must embody the same selfless dedication as the most rabid fundamentalist preachers, for they will be ministers of another sort, utilizing a classroom instead of a pulpit to convey humanist values in whatever subject they teach, regardless of the educational level, preschool, daycare, or large state university. The classroom must and will become an arena of conflict between the old and the new, the rotting corpse of Christianity, together with all its adjacent evils and misery in the new faith of humanism. It will undoubtedly be a long, arduous, painful struggle replete with much sorrow and many tears, but humanism will emerge triumphant." As you can see, this isn't a new problem, and there are those that even have gone before John Dunphy that have written similar things. Apathy surrounding how and what the next generation learns has been one of the main vehicles that has brought us to this point in culture today. As Christians, we must understand that our children are one of the most valuable gifts given by God and love them enough not to leave them to be discipled by those with anti-biblical worldviews. I'm very thankful for the influence that my grandparents and parents had in providing a consistent and biblical understanding of virtue and knowledge. In our stand for truth, which is really a stand for future generations, we must also be keenly aware of the propaganda that exists all around us. In Scripture, we are called to eradicate these lies with truth, and this is going to be really difficult since we're inundated with propaganda in education, in online and offline media, and even in some churches. One example of propaganda is in the example of gender affirmation affirmation surgery that I spoke about in my last video. If a young boy with gender dysphoria says, "Mom and Dad, I want to be a girl," if his parents do nothing to affirm his dysphoria, the vast majority of these cases end up resolving themselves during puberty and the child becomes content with his gender. However, if a therapist or doctor counsels him and gives him verbal advice to help him overcome his gender dysphoria, this action is illegal. Therapy helping a child stay the same gender that they are born with is now negatively called conversion therapy. However, if a doctor gives the child puberty blockers, permanently sterilizes the child, and mutilates their genitals, this is called gender-affirming care. Why is counseling a child demonized, whereas mutilating a child and shooting them up with puberty blockers is viewed as morally good? Beware of the propaganda that exists in the media we consume. Do not fall prey to it, and do not subject your children to the evil lies that propaganda bring. We should love the next generation enough to not compromise on these issues. As Paul said, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. The lies and propaganda of the kingdom of darkness must be destroyed and replaced with truth. If you join in this conflict as an ambassador for Christ, you will undoubtedly be unjustly criticized. Even people who call themselves Christians criticize Robinson's video for being bigoted. If you are willing to stand for truth, you must expect unjust and false criticism to be leveled against you. Jesus himself warns, "Woe to you when all people speak well of you, for so their fathers did the false prophets." He also says, "If the world hates you, know that it hated me before it hated you." And blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Notice it doesn't say because of their own idiocy, selfishness, or rudeness, but persecuted for righteousness' sake. Jesus continues, "Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward in heaven." You will be persecuted for standing on truth, and as a Christian, it's important to meet this persecution with calm and steadfast confidence. Christians should expect to be criticized by those inside and outside of the church, and they should expect injustice to be leveled against them. On the video with Calvin Robinson's speech, there was one comment in particular that I read that was written by a mother who stood against the heretical teachings of her church-based school. She went on to say that after she discussed some of her concerns with a teacher in them perpetuating unbiblical stances on gender and sexuality, she said that she was turned over to social services by these same educators for alleged religious abuse. According to Reverend Robinson, authoritarian tyranny of this nature is common in the UK. And not that long ago, a woman was silently praying on the opposite side of a street of an abortion clinic. She was promptly arrested as a protester. The lack of Christian freedom we have seen in communist Marxist countries is now making its way into Western culture. Even in my own country of America, in Ohio, one family lost custody of their teenage girl because they did not want her to undergo gender affirmation surgery. Now, what are we to do when faced with this ravenous evil? To those enduring persecution for your faith, I would say this: you are not forgotten. Those people who deny the existence of these injustices and those who commit them will eventually encounter divine justice. However, we are not called to hate them, but to respond to them with Christ-like love. This love must also involve telling the truth out of the interest of their own soul. Forgive them, as the amount of divine love that you have in your heart is the amount of love that you have for the person that you hate the most. Christ demonstrated this when he died for us while we were still sinners. He paid our debt before any of us were repentant. To those in my generation and younger, I would say this: do not abandon the church, even if they have offended you. Rather, study Scripture with intensity as you humbly and boldly reform the church that future generations might benefit. Christ died for the church, and if Christ loves the church, so should we. Do not fight narcissism with more narcissism or apathy. The church needs young men and young women with hearts after God's. The church needs young people that will not waver from Scripture or disregard it. The church doesn't need more people who will change the way they are to become more relevant or to appease wickedness. We must stand gently, but firmly for the truth. We all need to stand up like Reverend Robinson. As he said, we are simply followers of Christ, and as Christians, we are naturally countercultural. And in the words of Saint Athanasius of Alexandria,
if the world is against the truth, then I am against the world.